Wasn't made redundant like everyone else in the company, so kept showing up to work until the end to do nothing. This story is from June 2012, a week or so short of 10 years ago. I have generalized my exact work for anonymity. This story takes place in Australia, where we have very stringent laws around employment, firing, hiring, redundancies, maternity, etc. Little bit of background. I had started working for this particular company in March 2011. I was hired basically on the spot once I demonstrated my knowledge of the product that I would be working on, and started 2 days later because of a deadline that had to be met. I had a very specific contract for what I did. I was thrown in the deep end. A sleepless 7 days followed, but by the end I managed to do a decent job on the first of many products. 2 months after I started, my direct boss, the general manager, was let go and not really replaced properly, but a consultant took over their responsibilities. I should also add that the majority of operations were in Australia, while a smaller team operated in the UK, which is also where the CEO was based, despite 80 to 90% of the products coming out of our office. Towards the third quarter of 2011, the CEO's contract ended and not renewed, so the hunt began for a new CEO, who was eventually found and began working also in the UK location. After a very busy 2011, hiring approximately 30 new employees and launching a bunch of new products, business was booming. Until the second week of January 2012. By this point, upper management couldn't stay on top of everything, bringing in the COO of the parent company to oversee operations in Australia because we had a lot going on, but the CEO was based in the UK and new. At this point, we had a group meeting where we learned the future of the company and that operations in Australian would cease on June 30, 2012. End of the financial year in Australia. This was followed by management explaining that everyone except a handful of people would be made redundant with payouts. The handful who would remain will instead be made redundant after finishing their projects at the end of 2012. So over the next 5 months, as operations were slowly winding up and people started to exit the company, I'd lined up a few job interviews. One of these was my dream job, based in Europe, working in the exact field I wanted to be in. I kept this quiet, telling only a handful of my closest friends at my still current job. The recruitment process took quite a few weeks, many late-night Skype interviews, general chats. It was a big job and a massive interview process, and towards the end of May, I'm still in the running for this dream job, and by this point, pretty much everyone knows, wishing me luck. Around comes the start of June, and everyone starts to get their redundancy letters, giving them 28 days of official notice outlining their pay schedules and all legal entitlements. When I say everyone, I mean everyone, except me. I find this very strange, but quickly realize it's because if I hand in my notice, I won't be entitled to a payout and the company gets to save a few $1,000s. This is where my malicious compliance kicks in. I keep quiet and don't say anything. By about the second week of June, I find out that I didn't get my dream job, and I tell one other person but make sure they don't tell anyone else. Fast forward to the last week of June, and now there's just 7 employees including me left in the office alongside the GM, COO and CFO. Everyone, except me, has packed up their desks, and at this point just showing up to basically be social and reminisce. On the second last day, I run into the COO. Remember, he was from the parent company brought in to oversee the winding up of operations, next to my desk, and he goes,
"You must be saddened that tomorrow is the last day."
Casually I respond with,
"Oh, is it? I know it'll be quiet, but I didn't realize it's my last day."
He takes a closer look at my desk, still not packed up, has the most confused look on his face and responds with,
"Yeah, it's everyone's last day. Why wouldn't it be your last?"
"Oh, I never got a redundancy letter."
At this point I can see the expression on his face go from, huh, to, oh shit, in the hope that I would get a different job and resign so I don't get redundancy entitlements. Among everything else going on, between the GM, COO and CFO, they forgot to issue me an official redundancy notice. At this point he realizes all this and goes,
"Oh, come and see me in my office in 30 minutes.
Half an hour later, I go to his office. He's sitting there with the CFO by his side, but also kind of behind him. There are a few papers on the desk. I sit down and he starts,
"Sorry, we didn't do this properly at an earlier point, but here is all your redundancy paperwork."
The first piece of paper is the official letter. I pick it up, start reading. and the first thing that catches my eye is the date. It had been backdated to 27 days previously. Now this is a 2-copy letter that needs to be signed by both employer and employee. I put it down and go.
That's not today's date.
He gets flustered and responds with,
"Sorry, we forgot to get to you, but the notice was issued on that day."
The conversation goes like this.
It might have been issued then, but this is the first I'm seeing of it, and you'll note it hasn't been signed by me.
Yes, but you knew this was coming.
I did, but I assumed I'd be retained for longer because I wasn't given official notice.
What do you want us to do now?
Put today's date on it and I'll sign it.
But legally we need to wrap up operations before the end of the month. We can't do that.
You could try to fire me instead, but I don't think Fair Work Commission would be satisfied with your reason of me not wanting to sign a falsified redundancy letter.
By this point he's very flustered. Meanwhile I'm just laughing my ass off in my head.
Okay, let me change this for you.
He disappears, comes back with another copy with the correct date.
Okay, here you go.
I'm not signing this yet.
Why not?
Well, I've got 28 more days of legal employment now, which means I'm owed an extra day and a bit in annual leave in my final pay schedule.
He looks at the CFO and the CFO looks at him and nods in agreement. He changes my payout schedule, adding another day of annual leave to it, prints it out and hands it to me. I carefully look over everything. It's all in order now. I sign the paperwork. We both get copies.
So what will you be doing here for the next 28 days?
Nothing. I'm not coming back after today.
But you are legally employed for another 4 weeks. We can't be paying you for nothing. You should help out the IT guy and pack up some boxes.
There's nothing in my contract about packing up boxes, so I won't be doing that. Also, if you read my contract, it says I'm employed to work on this one specific project only, and any other work outside of this needs to be agreed on separately. And since you sold my project to the competition yesterday and is no longer at this company, I have no further contractual obligations to fulfill.
By this point the CFO is barely holding in his laughter.
Well, that's not fair. We have to pay you an extra month for nothing.
That's not my problem. My contractual obligations have been fulfilled. I'm going to pack up and go home at 5 p.m.
Okay. Please make sure it's not before 5 p.m.
I get back to my desk and pack it up in less than 5 minutes, put all my personal belongings in a box, and just sit around doing nothing. One of my colleagues who was remaining for a few more months comes over and asks,
"What was all that about?"
I explain everything in detail. He lets out the biggest booming laugh, goes to his office, closes the door and continues laughing. 15 minutes later, the CFO comes over and goes,
"You don't have to stay until the end of the day, you can take off whenever you want."
And this is the story of how I got an extra month's pay due to management's incompetence.
Hey OP, everyone can use an employee like you who is so smooth in a transition period. Well played at running circles around the COO. Remember to subscribe for more pink bananas.